Peace. I'm making this video because I was inspired with my thoughts about this reality we're living in America, American Negroes. And it came to me. We are a biblical prophecy people, and we are living in the biblical prophecies. And which prophecy, you might ask? We're living in the book of Judges. The book of Judges. We've been living in the book of Judges since the 1950s. If you look at prophecy in the Bible, they are in sequential order. We was in captivity 400 years. We've been led to the promised land. Egypt was destroyed, or the Pharaoh and his army was destroyed. We was made wealthy and rich. That's the Reconstruction period. And then we were led by Joshua into the promised land. And once we became inhabitants of the promised land, we were forced to integrate with the Philistines, to live next to the Philistines. And when we lived next to the Philistines, there was 400 years of judges. One of the judges' name was Deborah, prophetess Deborah. And the men that she led and rose up, the leader of them was Barrack. Now we've been stuck in this prophecy for the past 70 years because the scriptures say, like in the New Testament, they're going to come and teach you a new Jesus to take away from what the original Jesus told you, to keep you in limbo. That's my paraphrase. But that lets you know that when they found out what prophecy you living in, they're going to create a opposite version of that prophet or that prophecy to reverse the effects. So the first Deborah and Barrack was Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King. He believed that he was living in the prophecy of Moses and Pharaoh. And when he went to the mountaintop, because in the Bible, Moses and Aaron wasn't allowed to go to the promised land because they did wickedness. He took glory for giving them water out the rock. So he tell you, go to the promised land, you're going to see the land from up there, but you're not going to live in the land. So when Dr. King last speech, he referenced that in the book of Deuteronomy. Is that the last book of the Pentateuch? But yeah, he referenced that. But he thought he was Moses, but he really was Barrack. And Deborah was Rosa Parks. But what happened was, after they wiped out Dr. King, they created these false Barracks to lead us astray. And then it came to Deborah, which was the black woman, Angela Davis, in the 1970s. And they turned them into feminists, and they abandoned the black power movement, the black man. And then the government gave the black women money, resources, in order to keep them from the so-called black man, to keep us in that prophecy, to keep us from moving to the next phase. See, the next phase, the last phase in the book of Judges, there was a civil war between the Sodomites and the other children of Israel. The Benjamites were Sodomites. We haven't got to that level yet. We have been killing each other, but not for that reason, because we've been stuck in this prophecy of Deborah and Barrack. And Barry Satora, the dude they chose to be Barrack, they keep creating these false idols to keep reversing the effects of the prophecy, to get us out of that sequence to move on to the next level. because the end of the prophecy of the book of Judges, that's when it became the kingdom of Judah, Benjamin. Really, the first king was a Benjamite named Saul, and then David was the king. We had a whole book of Chronicles and Kings, and then we went back into captivity in Babylon afterwards. But we ain't even got to that point yet because we stuck in this prophecy of Deborah and Barrack. And I was inspired by a conversation I had earlier with this woman and it lets me. And the last thing we said was she talked about how she had this women empowerment group, and I asked her, "How come you don't think about empowering the men?" She told me, "Y'all need to empower yourselves." And I thought about the prophecy in the book of Judges about Deborah and Barrack. They say the men were so broken down and weak, it took Deborah to uplift them and inspire them to go fight the Philistines. Because in the book of the book of Judges, 400 years of battles with the Philistines. So I'm looking like that. That conversation reminded me of Deborah and Barrack, and it occurred to me that's where we've been for the last 60 years. And the people that run this country or this world, knows this, and they don't want us to figure this out, and they can continue because it was Rosa Parks who stood up in a bus that inspired Dr. King to come to Birmingham, Alabama, to start the bus boycotts. But he was the Barrack to the Deborah, which was Rosa Parks, and we haven't fulfilled that prophecy because Dr. King was led astray to believe that he was Moses, but he wasn't Moses. He was Barrack. And then when they changed the name of this is another reason I realized the prophecy, because they changed the name of Barry Satoru and called him Barrack, but he's the false Barrack. And he took the dreamer, that I have a dream speech, and gave the dreamers to the illegal aliens. He instituted gay marriage. He did everything to reverse the effects of Dr. King of Rosa Parks. But his name was Barrack. But he's the fake Barrack to reverse the prophecy, to keep us to go. When we reverse the prophecy, instead of us moving forward to the book of Samuel, we're going to go back to the book of Joshua, to the book of Exodus, and to back to Egypt, captivity. And that's exactly what Dr. King, instead of him fulfilling the prophecy of Deborah and Barrack, he led us back to Egypt. He led us astray. And then after he got wiped out, we had the Black Power movement with the Black Panthers, and they had the same dynamic. Huey P. Newton and all of them, H. Rap Brown, Bobby Seale, Fred Hampton, and they had the Women Panthers that was the inspiration. Outspoken Elaine Max, what's her name, and Angela Davis, and then they turned Angela Davis into a lesbian. She became a feminist, got rid of the afro, so they took away and reversed, because we keep on trying to fulfill this prophecy in the book of Judges, but they keep reversing it. And the ultimate damage they did when they created this fake Hamite Philistine Barry Satoru and made him the Barrack, the fake Barrack, to reverse the prophecy, to make us go backwards. But in order for to fulfill that prophecy, the Deborah must inspire the men of Judah, Jacob, the men of Jacob, the so-called American Negro, to fight the Philistines and to get victory and glory, so we can move on to the next phases of these prophecies, so we can reestablish the kingdom, because we're in a perpetual cycle of fulfilling these prophecies until the last days. And each patriarch or individual in the scriptures represent an age, a phase, but it's not a phase that passed with a sequence of time. In a normal sense, you must fulfill these obligations and you must get these things, these accomplishments, these goals. You must use this book as a guide and know exactly what goal you must fulfill in order for this sequence to pass on to the next phase, then the next phase, the next age, towards the glory. But yeah, I want to make that video to let people know that we've been stuck in the book of Judges. One of the judges was Deborah, a so-called black woman, who her job was to inspire the men who was broken down and dead into the ground to rise up and claim their glory and fight the Philistines. Another judge was Samson. Samson was an invincible Israelite who was a Nazarite. A Nazarite was a baby who mother or parents uh, pledged their life to be a servant to God, and they would never cut their hair. So they had these long dreads, and that was the key to Samson's power. What his downfall was chasing Philistine women, and Delilah was his second wife, and she betrayed him for silver. Then he ended up destroying everybody, went down in shame. I think that happened before Deborah. I gotta open the book and look. It was 10 different phases in the book of Judges. We've been stuck in a phase in which we've been broken down and demoralized. And you saw how Deborah or Rosa Parks was able to inspire Dr. King to lead the movement to our salvation. And his movement was undermined, and he became a champion for going back to captivity. Just like the second not the second fake Barrack, who they actually changed his name to let you know they don't want us to move on from this prophecy. Move on to the next phase. They want us to go back into captivity. That's all I gotta say.